Well, welcome back everyone to the another episode of the TundraCast, and today we got myself and Rossi, and got another special guest for you. He's a Calgary Flames TSN reporter, Mr. Salim Valji. So yeah, what are you up to these days, actually? Because I know the Flame season ended, I think a week ago.
Yeah, it's definitely a change of pace. So I was working a lot during the season and now a bit of
Yeah,
time off. You're still working. There's a couple of things that I'm doing with the network that'll be out publicly in the next couple of days. So working on
yeah,
those and then just relaxing. It's honestly pretty strange for me to go from working 80 hours a week for 5 months to
yeah,
to a lot less, but it's an opportunity to relax and do different things, whether it's do some professional development or just continue building relationships. So it's been good. It's
right,
just it's only a couple of days in. It's honestly a bit boring. I'm
yeah.
pretty wired to go, but yeah, I mean it's good to rest too. What about you? Are you sorry? I get these requests all the time, like, but are you a student or are you what's your background?
Well, we're doing so. We're just a group of friends, just trying to have fun making a podcast. But I think our
Cool.
end goal is trying to get like big into the podcast world. Just have fun. You know, and
That's
like hockey's the one thing I kind of want to get into. Whether it's like a sports writer or get on sports at TSN, it's just something I'm passionate about. So
cool.
that's
How
kind of like
old are
the.
you?
I just turned 17, so I'm
No,
entering
that's awesome.
grade 12 in September.
And are you in Calgary or?
I'm in Edmonton.
Oh, nice. Which part of the city?
Which part? Kind of
Yeah,
like
I grew
the
up there. So.
kind of like the western part, like kind of near West Edmonton Mallish.
Okay, okay. My
So like,
family lives in
yeah.
Parkview, so
All right, yeah, nice. All right, so what? That's kind of the first question I have for you because I read up on you. So you grew up in Edmonton. So how did you get into hockey, and who was your favorite player like growing up?
yeah. So I was born in Edmonton, and yeah, I just grew up around the Oilers. They haven't had a ton of success in my lifetime, unfortunately, but
Yeah,
um, yeah, it was fun. It's sports. I think brings different people from different communities together, and I think I went to my first game when I was 8 years old. It was actually in Calgary at the Saddle Dome, but you just get hooked. And from the time I was a kid, I really wanted to be a journalist and be a sports journalist, but I was kind of scared to pursue it and didn't really know how to get there. So I was in university initially to become a high school teacher. So it's yeah, but in terms of favorite players, growing up, I don't know, I really liked Paul Correa, Jerome McGinley.
right.
Who else? I think like Ladislav Schmid was a defenseman over here for a few years, and he was,
Yeah,
just really understated, but for a while there was a pretty good blue liner. Um, but yeah, you just kind of it was always more interesting to me how things worked, how trades get made or how general managers do their job or
right,
I didn't have a ton of favorite players even as a kid. It was just kind of wondering how this all works and how it all comes together.
right. And so hey, now you're on the other side of the Battle of Alberta, working for the Flames. So I mean, that must be cool.
Yeah, it's different. It's enjoyable. It's a bit awkward coming in during a pandemic when um which is awkward enough, just not
Yeah,
being in the locker room and stuff, but uh, doing so during one of the most disappointing seasons in franchise history, doing so during a year when the coach gets fired and there's all this uncertainty about the direction of the organization. So
right,
it was already kind of a difficult situation, but it just adds to that level of how you approach your job. And beyond that, Jermaine did amazing things here for a really long time, and he built him and Vardy, the camera person teammate here, built something really great, and you feel a bit of the expectations of coming in too, and just trying to do the job your own way, but really you're following a legend. So there's
Yeah.
all those factors, and I thought a lot about everything. And yeah, it's been great so far. The actual Battle of Alberta was a bit less heated than I thought it was going to be this year, to be honest. I don't know if you thought that way too,
Yeah.
but a bit
Yeah,
less exciting.
I actively yelled at him during the battles of Alberta because I would stay up to watch him, and I was like, "Dude, what's going on?"
There's nothing much happening over here, but yeah, I mean the Oilers clearly had some disappointment too, so it's
Yeah.
rough times for Alberta hockey fans, I guess.
Yeah, I stayed up until 2 a.m. and it was a close series, triple OT, but that's how hockey works. So, all right, Ross, you got the next question.
Yeah, how'd you get started at TSN?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I lived in Montreal for a few years, and I went to university there to get my journalism degree. And I basically in my year of graduation, so I graduated in 2017 from Concordia University, and um I just cold emailed TSN. I didn't know anyone at the network, but I basically said, I'm a eager student about to graduate. Are there any opportunities? And um, it was around the time that they were about to get the Montreal Canadiens regional rights to show games in Montreal. And they said, "Hey, we have this opportunity to be. I think the title is associate producer statistician." Um, and they said, "Hey, if you want this opportunity, it's yours." And I jumped at it, and it was a really fun job to have for a couple of years. And it grew from there. So I'd help the on-air reporters like Brian Mudrick and Mike Johnson. I'd prepare stats packages for them and help with communication in the control truck during games. It was a really cool job, actually. I got to travel around North America for it, but it was honestly just a cold email. I didn't know anyone at the network, and I always tell students like yourself that like TSN, ESPN, and the New York Times are like the three biggest publications I've worked with, and not once did any of those publications ever ask for my grades or my work samples or my resume. It was just a lot of relationship building and reaching out to people and introducing yourself, and they give you an opportunity with something small, and then it sort of grows from there.
That's nice. So just touching back, because I know you mentioned Jeff Ward. I kind of felt like the decision was so sudden, especially since I think they signed him to an extension like 4 or 5 months beforehand. And so what was like the one game that really decided management that he had to be fired? Was it the multiple 5-1 losses to Ottawa, or was it just the inconsistent play as a whole?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I think a lot of people are trying to figure that out. I guess you can, the general manager is has to have his pulse on the team, and there may be certain, it could have been the Calgary more. They would have at the very least been in the fight for the playoffs till the very end. But you can kind of see sometimes with body language, you can see with how players respond to practice. There are certain cues of that nature that a general manager would probably look at. I imagine that Treliving has the communication lines open with certain leaders in the Flames dressing room. So it might have been that, but as a manager, it might not be okay. That's the pinpoint where you can tell that the coach lost the players. I think it's sort of a gradual build up to that. And if you even look at the comments that players made, such as Sean Monahan and Milan Lucic, leading up to that, it was a lot of, we have to play for each other. We have to be selfless. We have to sort of be on the same page. And that might indicate to a manager that the players are a bit disjointed, or there's messaging that's not getting through. So I think it's a gradual buildup, but you look at body language during practice and during games, comments that the players make to reporters, and just, are they responding to the coach? And clearly Treliving, felt that they weren't responding, and I don't think they had a better record under Sutter, but you can perhaps say that they have a stronger identity. So
Yeah.
it's just a question now for the organization. They just hope to build off of that, of what Sutter has done, because for all the uncertainty around the team, it seems the one thing that's almost guaranteed is that Sutter will be back for the upcoming season.
Right.
Yeah, with you talking about traveling and everything going on with the roster, with the Flames being very inconsistent from year to year, um, do you think it's time to blow it up with people like Gaudreau and Monahan? And do you believe that Trevelling is in the hot seat?
Uh, in terms of blowing it up, I don't know. I have this conversation a lot with people, and honestly, my opinion changes by the day.
Yeah.
I think there's a bit of danger sometimes when you do the same thing over and over again, and the results aren't really different. And again, they've won one playoff series since 2004. That's a fact that is tattooed to this organization. That's one playoff series win in 17 years. And I sometimes wonder if it's dangerous to be branded as a mediocre organization, right? If the entire hockey world sees you maybe not as Buffalo North, but maybe a couple of levels down, that could be potentially really dangerous for your organization. So I don't know. I think having a rebuild right now would be kind of tough. I don't think this year's draft is the type that you would want to have necessarily tanked out for or gotten a bottom three pick. I just think they need to make hockey trades at the end of the day. Trading player X for another player as opposed to draft picks and prospects. I think if they can do that, that would probably be the better course of action. And there is a lot of talk right now that it's tough to move money because it's a pandemic and the salary cap is going to be flat. But I mean, Sean Monahan is still valuable, right? He's scored 30 goals a few times. Gaudreau, clearly, he ended with 20 points in 15 games under a head coach that doesn't exactly emphasize offense. So to me, it would be more the hockey trade route where they could make trades for different players as opposed to dealing their players for draft picks and prospects. In terms of Treliving being on the hot seat, I think that's a fair thing to say, just because it's been 7 years. It's been one playoff series win in those last 7 years, and that came all the way back in 2015. And there hasn't been a ton of growth in the organization under Treliving. If you look at it, they've traded away, I think, more draft picks than all but 5 National Hockey League teams. They've traded, I think, more first round picks than all but a handful of teams, and that hasn't really gotten them anywhere. And as a result, their prospect depth is pretty shallow, and they haven't really gotten any closer to the ultimate goal of being perennial Stanley Cup contenders and bringing the Stanley Cup over here to Calgary. So I think he is on the hot seat, and there's an opportunity there too to get more progressive, perhaps, in how you run an organization. I don't know, you two are really young, but the way Mike Gillis ran the Vancouver Canucks for a period there in the mid 2000s, they were considered a really progressive organization. They invested a lot in sleep science and advanced stats, and they just did things that maybe raise a few eyebrows, but all teams are doing that stuff now to an extent. And I think, if you're the Calgary Flames ownership, you probably look at what Treliving has done and you kind of think, okay, we're not much further along than when he started. Are there opportunities to improve and evolve? And does that include the person that's had the job for the past 7 years? So I think he's on the hot seat, but we'll get clarity about his status this week, I think. So
Right. You talked about the rookies. There's a couple guys that come to mind. What's one rookie you can see making a big impact next season? Because there's guys like Jacob Peltier, Connor Zary, Adam Ruzicka and Matthew Phillips came up at the end of the season, I believe. So, if there's one rookie you think that'll have a huge impact on the team next season, who do you think it will be?
I don't know about huge impact. I think expectations maybe have to be tempered a bit because it's really nice to get romantic about prospects and players, but we saw this past season with Yuso. It would, and Yuso's a really young. I think he's 20 years old, so he's not much older than you. But there was a lot of expectations on him, and people thought that he was going to contend for the Calder, and it doesn't really work that way for the vast majority of young players, right? So
Right.
Yuso was a third pairing defenseman, and he had probably a decent rookie season. It's really tough to play in the National Hockey League, probably more so as a defender than it might be as a forward. And so it's important to maybe temper expectations. I could see Adam Ruzicka being a pretty good bottom six forward for the team next year. I could see him, assuming that I think he's a center, so working on faceoffs in the off season and getting stronger and doing those things that players normally do during the summer months. I could see him being a really, really interesting bottom six player, especially if the Flames don't re-sign Derek Ryan. That's a pretty big hole there because Ryan was really valuable to this team in killing penalties and winning faceoffs, and he had more offense, I think, than people gave him credit for too. So I think Adam Ruzicka, he might not be, contending for the Calder Trophy or scoring 30 goals over an 82 game season, but he to me could have a really good rookie season as a bottom six player. So and they've developed those players in the past over here. Andrew Mangiapane is a great example. He's probably the best success story for this organization in terms of drafting in the past few years. So they have a good track record at the draft, but I think Ruzicka would probably be the rookie that'll play the most number of games next year.
I know you don't have a lot of time, so I think we have time for two more questions, if that's okay.
Sure, I can go till 2:30, whatever you want.
All right.
Speaking of like off-season moves and everything, what do you think the Flames do at the expansion draft? Like, is it time to let go of a long-time, captain Mark Giordano, or should he retire as a Flame? And who do you, in your opinion, who would you think would be the best to go, and who do you think you'll lose?
The expansion draft. I think you have to make hard decisions. Again, I think they've won one playoff series in your two lifetimes, and if you have a track record like that, which isn't great, then you have to change the way you do things. And Mark Giordano seems like an outstanding human being. Forget on the ice, just as a community person, the things him and his wife are involved in, it's an awesome. They seem like wonderful people, but this is a tough decision with the franchise. Chris Tanev was the best blue liner on the team, and you're not going to expose the two 24-year-olds in Noah Hanifin and Rasmus Anderson. And Chris Tanev has been a pretty big part of this organization, even though he's been here for only a few months. He helped elevate Hanifin's game. He played with Giordano, and Giordano improved while playing with Chris Tanev. So that's clearly the choice, right? You protect the 31-year-old Tanev or the 37-year-old Giordano. I think that Treliving and Giordano have a pretty good relationship, and they've already talked about this. I just don't see how you can expose Chris Tanev. I really don't. And it's a tough call. It's pretty rarely in life does the fairy tale play out in reality, right? Where Giordano retires as a Flame and with the Stanley Cup, and like it's just you sometimes have to make really tough decisions. That being said, I think that I just maybe I'm the only person that thinks this way, but I think they're going to take Lucic in the expansion draft.
Wow.
For a few reasons. Number one, they do have to get to the salary cap floor, which I think is 60 million next year. Number two, Lucic is actually a pretty serviceable and good NHLer. He's probably not a top 6 player anymore, but he is a good NHLer still. And he's someone that you can probably make your captain. He has pretty evident leadership qualities, and you can market him. So for those reasons, I think Seattle will take Lucic, but I think the Flames have to expose Giordano, and I don't think they can trade a second round draft pick to Seattle not to take Giordano. You have so few draft picks as it is these days, the past few years, that you have to take the risk, and change was going to come anyways to the organization. So you just have to make the uncomfortable decision. But I do think Seattle will take Lucic. So.
That's also good for Seattle because Lucic, I mean, he's not from Seattle, but he's from Vancouver, so he's known to that region a little bit. Yeah. And, I guess there's some familiarity there. I think, that could be a great pick for Seattle. And he could be, like, kind of like Derek Englund, like he was for Vegas, I think. Where, he's kind of like the team's quote-unquote captain. So I think that'd be a great choice for Seattle.
Yeah, exactly. And he has leadership qualities, and he's still a pretty good player for... Yeah. I think he's in his early 30s, and he's still effective physically. He can play on the power play. And again, Seattle's not allowed to take all the minimum salary players either. They do have to hit the floor. So they do have to spend $61 million next year. And Lucic's contract does help you get there. So it'll be fascinating. It's really going to be a turning point for the Calgary Flames regardless, I think.
All right. And I think our last question has to do with free agency. You mentioned Mangiapane. His contract is up next season. Dubé and Valimaki end this year. A bit of a disappointing season for Dubé, especially since he had such a great playoffs. He kind of broke out there a little bit. So how much of a raise do you think Dubé and Valimaki will get? And same thing with Mangiapane, because a lot of people, there's some people that don't like advanced analytics, which makes sense. But he was statistically one of the best defensive forwards. He was probably the Flames' best forward this season offensively. So, how much of a raise do you think those three guys are going to get?
Yeah, I think you might know more than I would, but Mangiapane is a restricted free agent next year, I believe.
All right.
He's got arbitration rights next year. But Dubé and Valimaki, their entry-level contracts are up. You're right. I think, they're both kind of tricky contracts, Dubé and Valimaki, just because there's kind of a small sample size, especially for Valimaki, who's been injured and had some bad luck. I think they'll definitely get raises, that's for sure. I would imagine both of them would be between 1.5 and 2 million. Maybe Dubé would make a bit more. I also would think that it would be shorter contracts. I know we saw Rasmus Anderson get a 6-year deal, I think right after his entry-level contract expired. I would not anticipate either Dubé or Valimaki getting that. I would assume 2 to 3 years for both of them. And then, as you mentioned, Andrew Mangiapane is such an underrated player outside of Calgary. He scores in all situations. He's great as a shutdown player. Just he has more goals in even strength than a lot of the past couple of years than a lot of big names. So I would think that if you're Flames management, and they can sign him to a contract extension this offseason, even though he's not restricted till next year, but I would think Mangiapane, if you're Flames management, you want him locked up long term, just because he has arbitration rights next year, and he's proven that at the very least he'll be a very, very good top 9 player, and he could potentially even moonlight on the top line itself. So I think for Mangiapane, they would want him longer term. To me, the most interesting decision is Matthew Tkachuk.
Yeah.
And if he and his future, not a ton of people are talking about that, but he's due a $9 million qualifying offer next off season. And again, similar to Mangiapane, he can sign an extension starting this summer. But does a $9 million winger, and he'll probably have to pay him $10 million or $11 million in a few of those years in his contract, does that fit with the direction that the organization is going? So that's a fascinating one to me, more than Gaudreau or Mangiapane. And it depends on if Treliving is at the helm as well, and if the organization sort of undergoes a major transformation in how their philosophies, really.
Right. All right, so I think that's it for today. Thank you, Salim, for coming on. It was a blast having you on here.
Thanks a lot. Feel free to reach out if you need anything else. And yeah, all the best. Stay safe.
All right, thank you.
You too.
Okay.
All right, and that will do it for today's episode of the TundraCast, and we'll see you guys next time.